A young boy from Minnesota was playing outside in the freshly fallen snow, and when his parents checked on him, he had vanished without a trace. But 8 years later, his father looks under the neighbor's dog kennel, and what he sees makes his blood run cold. The small town of Maple Hollow, nestled in the northern reaches of Minnesota, was known for its tight-knit community and brutal winters. With a population of barely 2,000 residents, it was a place where everyone knew each other's business, shared their sorrows, and celebrated their joys together. The town had always prided itself on its safety and low crime rates. Children played freely outdoors, neighbors left their doors unlocked, and the community functioned like an extended family. That was until 8 years ago, when Joshua Coulter vanished without a trace. On a cold Saturday morning, as snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, Ethan Coulter sat at his dining table sorting through police documents. The papers had become a familiar presence in their home, reports, witness statements, and potential leads that ultimately led nowhere. His eyes occasionally drifted to the window overlooking their front yard, where his thoughts inevitably returned to that fateful day. His wife, Claire, moved about the house, the sound of her cleaning providing a rhythmic background to his thoughts. The simple act of housework seemed to give her a sense of normalcy, something to occupy her hands and mind. Despite the years that had passed, their home still felt suspended in time, waiting for their son to return. "Still going through those?" Claire asked as she passed by with a basket of laundry. Ethan nodded, shuffling through another stack of papers. Detective Palmer said they received a couple of new tips last month. Nothing substantial, but... He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both lived on these fragments of hope, however small. Joshua had been 5 years old, a bright red-headed boy with a laugh that filled their home. That winter morning he had begged to play outside in the freshly fallen snow. Ethan and Claire had let him, as they had done countless times before. Their property bordered a small wooded area that was familiar territory for local children. Ethan had promised to check on him in 20 minutes. When he went outside, Joshua was gone. The search that followed was unlike anything Maple Hollow had ever seen. The entire town had mobilized. Search parties combed the woods, divers checked the frozen lake half a mile away, police interviewed every resident. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually the active search was called off. But Ethan and Claire never stopped looking. The doorbell's chime pulled Ethan from his thoughts. He rose from the table, straightening his sweater as he made his way to the front door. When he opened it, he found Harold Stevens, their neighbor from across the street, standing on their porch. Harold was a tall man in his late 40s with prematurely graying hair and a perpetually serious expression. He had lived in Maple Hollow for over 20 years, but in the decade since losing his wife and son in a house robbery, he had become increasingly reclusive. "Morning, Ethan," Harold said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Sorry to bother you, but the snowstorm last night destroyed part of your fence again. It blew over onto my property." Ethan immediately began to apologize. "I'm really sorry about that, Harold. That old fence has been giving us trouble for years. I'll come by and take it off your property, but I'll need to get a welder first. Mine's broken, and I haven't had the time to buy a new one." Harold waved dismissively. "Don't worry about it. I already patched it up. I just came by to let you know." Ethan was surprised and felt a twinge of awkwardness. "You didn't have to do that. Thank you." "No problem," Harold replied with a slight shrug. "I had the tools and was working on something in the back of the house anyway." "Yeah, I heard some noise earlier this morning. Guessed you must be building something back there?" Harold didn't elaborate on what he had been constructing, simply saying, "Sorry if the fence doesn't look as good as new." "It's an old fence anyway," Ethan assured him. "Thank you again." Harold nodded and turned to leave. As Ethan closed the door, he found Claire coming in from the backyard, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Was that Harold I heard?" she asked, unwinding a scarf from around her neck. Ethan nodded. "Our fence blew down again. He fixed it himself." Claire hung her scarf on a hook by the door and smiled faintly. "It's been a while since we've gotten together with Harold. We should invite him to dinner as a thank you for fixing the gate." Ethan hesitated. "I don't know, Claire. We still need to go through some of these reports from the police about the new leads for Joshua. I'd rather focus on that during dinner, not when we have company." Claire's expression softened with a mixture of sadness and gentle reproach. "Ethan, we've become so isolated and lonely over these 8 years. When was the last time we invited someone over? Years ago?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, knowing she was right. They had gradually withdrawn from social connections, their search for Joshua consuming every aspect of their lives. "Harold, too," Claire continued. "Look at how private he's become after his wife and son died in that house robbery 10 years ago. Can you imagine living all alone for years? He must be a lonely man." She paused, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "It might be good to sit down and have dinner together. We've all gone through similar experiences of loss. Maybe we could form a new bond." Ethan considered her words, his gaze drifting back to the stack of documents on the table. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps they both needed this small step toward normalcy. "All right," he finally said. "I'll go invite him for dinner tonight." Claire's smile was worth the concession. It had been too long since he'd seen genuine happiness on her face. Ethan zipped up his jacket and stepped outside into the crisp winter air. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he crossed the street toward Harold's house. It was a modest 2-story home, similar to most in their neighborhood, though somewhat less maintained. The paint was peeling in places, and the snowfall had been left untended, piling up in recent years. When he reached Harold's front door, Ethan knocked firmly and waited. After a minute, with no response, he knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. He was about to turn and leave when he heard sounds coming from behind the house, a dull thudding noise like someone hammering. Ethan rounded the corner of the house, his boots sinking into the deeper snow of the backyard. "Harold?" he called out. "It's Ethan from across the street." The sounds led him to a small wooden structure at the far end of the yard, an old dog kennel that had been there for as long as Ethan could remember. Harold was crouched inside it, seemingly adjusting something. At the sound of Ethan's voice, Harold froze momentarily before carefully backing out of the small structure. "Ethan," Harold said, sounding slightly breathless. "Sorry, I didn't hear you knocking." "No problem," Ethan replied, noticing how quickly Harold had straightened up and positioned himself in front of the kennel. "I'm surprised you're still keeping that old doghouse. It's been years since you had a dog, hasn't it? Do you want help tearing it down?" Harold's response came with a slight stutter. It's a reminder of Rex. He was a good dog. I like keeping it around." Ethan nodded, understanding the sentiment. People clung to different reminders of those they'd lost. Harold gestured to a partially built larger structure nearby. "Actually, I've been thinking about getting a new dog. I've been working on that for a few weeks now, and wanted to complete it this morning." Ethan's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Seriously? You're still working in this weather? That's impressive, Harold. I used to breed dogs myself when I was younger. More of a hobby than a job, really. What kind of breed are you thinking about?" "I haven't thought much about it," Harold replied, seeming more relaxed now that the conversation had shifted. "Maybe a puppy or a mid-sized dog." "Well, Claire and I actually wanted to invite you to dinner tonight," Ethan said. "But if you don't mind, I could help you finish that new kennel this morning, and we could go find a dog together afterward. I know a local breeder in the area." Harold seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. "I'd appreciate that. I should be able to finish this in a few hours, and dinner sounds nice. Thank you." As they talked, Ethan noticed Harold occasionally glancing back at the old doghouse. There was something odd about his neighbor's behavior, but Ethan couldn't quite place what it was. Harold had always been a private person, especially after his tragedy. So perhaps it was just his discomfort with the unexpected social interaction. "Great, I'll leave you to it then," Ethan said, taking a step back. "Just come over when you're ready to head out to the breeder, and we'll see you for dinner around 6. Harold nodded, already turning back toward the doghouse. "I'll see you then." As Ethan walked back across the street, he couldn't shake a strange feeling. There was nothing overtly suspicious about their interaction. Harold had been perfectly cordial, if a bit awkward. Yet something felt off. Perhaps it was just the unusual sight of his reclusive neighbor suddenly making plans for a new pet after years of solitude. Or perhaps it was just the oddity of someone doing all that woodworking out in the snow. Reaching his own front door, Ethan brushed the thoughts aside. People processed grief differently, and if Harold was finally taking steps to move forward with his life, that could only be a good thing. Ethan entered his house, stamping the snow from his boots in the entryway. Claire was in the living room, straightening up the scattered throw pillows and magazines that had accumulated over the week. "He said yes to dinner," Ethan announced, hanging his jacket on the hook by the door. Claire's face brightened. "That's wonderful. What time should I expect him?" "Around 6, I think. You know what's interesting? He's building a new doghouse and planning to get a dog. I offered to take him to a breeder this afternoon." Claire paused in her tidying and looked up with genuine surprise. "A dog, after all these years?" She smiled thoughtfully. "See, I told you he must be feeling lonely. Getting a pet is a good first step toward healing." Ethan returned to the dining table where he'd left the police documents. "I suppose so. It's just unexpected. He's kept that old doghouse all these years as a memorial of sorts." Claire resumed her cleaning, moving into the kitchen now. "People find different ways to move on. Speaking of which, we need groceries for dinner tonight. We're running low on everything, and I want to make something special." Ethan sighed quietly, looking down at the stack of papers before him. He'd been hoping to spend the morning reviewing the new leads, compiling his thoughts before the week ahead consumed his time again. "Can you grab what we need? I'd really like to get through these documents today." "If you don't mind, can you help me with the grocery run instead?" Claire asked. "I want to clean the house properly for tonight, and you know I don't drive well in this weather. It's too cold to walk or wait for the bus." Ethan looked at his wife's hopeful expression and felt a familiar pang of guilt. She asked for so little these days, and she'd been the one to suggest reconnecting with their neighbor, a small but significant step toward normalcy. "All right," he conceded. "I still have some time before Harold's ready to go to the breeder anyway. I'll do the grocery run, drop everything back here, and then head out with him if he's ready." Claire's grateful smile was worth the sacrifice of his morning plans. She quickly wrote out a shopping list, adding items as she checked the pantry and refrigerator. Ethan headed outside again, shoveling a path from their front door to the driveway before starting the car. He let the engine idle for a while to warm up, his breath curling into small clouds in the crisp, cold air. As he was about to pull out of the driveway, he noticed Harold crossing the street toward him. "Ethan," Harold called, approaching the car window. Ethan rolled down the window. "Hey, all set with the doghouse already?" Harold shook his head. "Actually, I just remembered I already have plans to meet with some friends this morning. I'll have to cancel our trip to the breeder, but I'll still come for dinner tonight." "No problem at all," Ethan replied, surprised that the reclusive Harold had social plans. "I'm just heading out for groceries. We'll see you at 6. Harold nodded and turned back toward his own house. Ethan watched him go, that strange feeling returning. In all the years they'd been neighbors, he'd never known Harold to mention friends or social gatherings. But then again, they hadn't exactly been close in recent years, both families retreating into their private sorrows. Ethan drove to the supermarket, his mind toggling between thoughts of Joshua and mental notes of what to buy. The grocery store was relatively empty for a Saturday, most people likely deterred by the weather forecast predicting more snow later that day. He methodically worked through Claire's list, adding a few items he knew she liked but had forgotten to write down. As he loaded the groceries into the car, heavy gray clouds were gathering overhead, promising the predicted snowfall would arrive sooner rather than later. As Ethan pulled out of the supermarket parking lot, a familiar car passed by on the main road. He did a double-take, recognizing Harold's blue sedan. The car's windows were clear enough that Ethan could easily see Harold was alone, driving in the opposite direction from where their neighborhood was located. Ethan's route home followed the same road for a while, and he found himself unintentionally trailing Harold at a distance. A few minutes later, Harold's car pulled into the parking lot of Northwoods Kennels, a local dog breeder that Ethan had mentioned earlier. Ethan drove past slowly, confusion settling in. Harold had canceled their trip together, claiming he had plans with friends, yet here he was, at the very breeder. Alone. For a moment, Ethan considered pulling in as well, but what would he say? He had no right to question Harold's white lie. Perhaps the man simply preferred to choose a dog on his own, without the pressure of someone else's opinions. Or maybe he was meeting his friends there. Still, as Ethan continued home, the inconsistency bothered him. It seemed a strange thing to lie about, especially when Ethan had offered his help and expertise. But Harold had always been odd and private, more so since his tragedy. By the time Ethan arrived home, light snow had begun to fall again. He unloaded the groceries quickly and found Claire in the kitchen, already preparing for dinner. "You're back sooner than I expected," she said, taking a bag from his hands. Ethan nodded. "There wasn't much traffic, and actually I saw Harold at the kennel on my way back." "The kennel? I thought he canceled with you." "He did," Ethan replied, setting down the remaining bags on the counter. "Said he had plans with friends, but I just saw him pulling into Northwoods Kennels, alone." Claire paused in unpacking the groceries. "Well, that is strange, but it's not really our business, is it? Maybe he just wanted to look on his own first." "Maybe," Ethan agreed, though something about it still felt off to him. As they stored the groceries, Ethan glanced out the kitchen window and noticed Harold's car pulling into his driveway across the street. Harold got out and opened his trunk, revealing a metal dog kennel with what appeared to be a German shepherd inside. From this distance, and with Harold's back to him, Ethan couldn't see the dog clearly, but he could make out the distinctive coloring. "He's back already," Ethan remarked. "With a German shepherd, it looks like—" Claire joined him at the window. "That was quick. He must have really connected with the dog." "Love at first sight does happen, I suppose," Ethan said, echoing Claire's earlier sentiment. "But it's still odd. I used to be a breeder. I know these transactions usually take some time with paperwork and everything. He was in and out incredibly fast." They watched as Harold struggled to maneuver the kennel across his snowy yard, the dog making the task more difficult with its movements. "He's having trouble with it," Ethan observed. "I should go help him." Before Claire could respond, Ethan was already heading for the door. He crossed the street quickly, calling out to Harold as he approached. "Need a hand with that?" Harold's head snapped up, his expression momentarily startled. No, I'm fine," he said quickly, his tone sharper than the situation warranted. "I'll see you this evening," he added, clearly dismissing Ethan. Taken aback by the abrupt response, Ethan hesitated. "All right, if you're sure." Harold just nodded, already turning his attention back to the kennel and struggling to push it through the snowy yard. Ethan returned to his house, a growing uneasiness settling in his stomach. Something about Harold's behavior seemed off. But what reason did he have to be suspicious of his neighbor? The man had been nothing but quiet, if distant, all these years. As he entered his house again, Claire gave him a questioning look. "He didn't want help," Ethan explained with a shrug. "Said he's fine on his own." Claire nodded, returning to her dinner preparations. "Some people just don't like accepting help. It makes them feel vulnerable." "I suppose," Ethan agreed, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Harold's strange behavior than simple pride. The hours passed slowly as the snow continued to fall outside, blanketing Maple Hollow in a fresh coat of white. Ethan had returned to his stack of police documents, finally able to concentrate on reviewing them. There weren't many new developments, just the same frustrating lack of concrete leads that had characterized the search for Joshua from the beginning. One report mentioned a possible sighting in a town 200 miles south, but the description was vague, and the follow-up investigation had yielded nothing. Another referenced a child matching Joshua's description who had been enrolled in a school in Montana under a different name. But when authorities had checked, it turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. Ethan rubbed his temples, fighting off the headache that always seemed to accompany these review sessions. 8 years of false hopes and dead ends had taken their toll, but he couldn't give up. Somewhere out there, Joshua might still be waiting for them to find him. As evening approached, Claire's cooking filled the house with warm, inviting aromas. She had prepared a pot roast with vegetables, fresh dinner rolls, and an apple pie for dessert. It was more elaborate than their usual meals, a sign of how important this small social occasion was to her. "Do you think he'll actually show up?" Ethan asked as he helped set the table. Claire arranged napkins beside each plate. "Why wouldn't he?" "I don't know. He's been acting strangely today, all these last-minute changes of plans, the way he reacted when I offered to help with the dog." Ethan trailed off, unsure how to articulate his vague misgivings. "He's probably just nervous about socializing after being alone for so long," Claire reasoned. "Let's give him the benefit of the doubt." At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Harold stood on their porch holding a bottle of wine, his coat dusted with snow. "I hope Red is all right," he said, handing the bottle to Ethan. "Perfect, thank you," Ethan replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Come on in out of the cold." Claire greeted Harold warmly, taking his coat and thanking him for coming. The initial awkwardness of the reunion gradually eased as Claire served drinks and they settled at the dining table. The conversation remained light at first, local news, the weather, harmless topics that required little emotional investment. As they began to eat, Ethan decided to broach the subject of Harold's new pet. "So, I see you got a German Shepherd today. How's it settling in?" Harold's fork paused midway to his mouth, and Ethan noticed a subtle tension in his posture. "It's fine, still adjusting to the new environment." "That was a quick trip to the breeder?" Ethan said casually. "I saw you heading that way on my drive back from the supermarket, right after you mentioned meeting up with some friends." Harold's eyes flickered nervously. "I'm sorry about that. My schedule became unpredictable. My friend canceled last minute, and I was so excited about getting a dog that I just went ahead to the kennel." Ethan nodded, sipping his wine. "I was surprised they processed everything so quickly. When I was breeding, the paperwork alone usually took a while." Harold shifted in his chair. "Actually, I had ordered it a few days ago. I was just there to pick it up." The explanation sounded reasonable enough, but Ethan couldn't shake what he remembered from that morning. Harold had said he wasn't even sure yet whether he wanted a puppy or a mid-sized breed. And something about Harold's demeanor now, the way he avoided direct eye contact, the faint tremor in his hand as he reached for his glass, hinted at a discomfort that went deeper than simple social awkwardness. Claire, sensing the growing tension, gently changed the subject. "Harold, Ethan mentioned you lost your wife and son 10 years ago. I'm so sorry. We understand how hard it is to lose family." Harold's expression softened slightly. "Yes, it's been difficult, living alone all these years." "We know something about that kind of pain," Claire said quietly. "After Joshua disappeared." She didn't get to finish her thought. Harold suddenly became visibly agitated, his gaze fixed on the window where the snow was now falling heavily. "I'm very sorry," he interrupted, "but I think I should check on my dog." It's snowing harder now, and the dogs knew. It might be stressed with the adjustment. He stood up abruptly. "I'm afraid I left it outside in the kennel, and I forgot to bring it inside before coming here." Ethan glanced out the window at the intensifying snowfall. "Yes, you're right. The wind's picking up too. Do you need help bringing it in?" No, Harold said quickly, almost panic-stricken at the suggestion. "The dog's a German shepherd and might be alarmed by strangers. Even I'm still getting familiar with it. I'll handle it and come back after I'm done." Claire rose from her chair. "Of course, just make sure your dog is safe. We live right across the street. Don't worry about rushing back if it needs your attention." Harold nodded gratefully and headed for the door, leaving his coat hanging on the rack in his haste. After he left, Ethan and Claire returned to the table, the sudden departure leaving an awkward lull in the evening. "That was strange," Ethan remarked. Claire shrugged, refilling their wine glasses. "He's concerned for his pet. It's understandable." "I suppose," Ethan agreed reluctantly. As they continued their meal, Claire sighed softly. "Ethan, imagine if I was gone too, and you had to go to work and take care of the house alone. Harold has been managing all that by himself for a decade. He must be a responsible man to care so much about his new dog. He deserves some happiness." Time passed, and Harold didn't return. The pie Claire had baked sat untouched on the counter, and the dining room grew quiet except for the occasional clink of silverware. "It's okay if he doesn't make it back," Claire said eventually. "The dog's new, so maybe he's having trouble settling it in." She began to clear the table, but paused when she noticed Harold's coat still hanging by the door. "Oh, he forgot his coat. It's freezing outside." Ethan stood up. "I'll bring it back to him." Claire nodded, continuing to clear the dishes as Ethan grabbed both Harold's coat and his own before heading out into the snowy night. The snow crunched beneath Ethan's boots as he crossed the street, the cold air biting at his exposed face. Snowflakes swirled around him, illuminated by the streetlights like tiny stars falling to earth. Harold's house was dark except for a faint light visible from what Ethan assumed was the kitchen at the back. He approached the front door and knocked firmly, holding Harold's coat folded over his arm. After waiting for nearly a minute with no response, he knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Ethan frowned, glancing at his watch. It had been over half an hour since Harold had left their house. Surely it shouldn't take that long to bring a dog inside, even if it was being difficult. As he stood there contemplating what to do next, a distinct barking sound came from the backyard. The dog was still outside, in this weather? Concern overriding hesitation, Ethan made his way around the side of the house, calling out as he went. "Harold? It's Ethan. Are you okay? I brought your coat." The backyard was partially illuminated by the light spilling from the kitchen window. Ethan could make out the German shepherd, not inside the house, as Harold had indicated was his plan, but still outside. The dog was moving restlessly in and out of its small kennel, a chain attached to its collar limiting its movement. Ethan looked around for Harold, but saw no sign of him. The situation made no sense. Harold had left their dinner specifically to bring the dog inside, yet here it was, still chained outside in the worsening weather. Approaching cautiously, Ethan noticed that the larger doghouse Harold had been constructing was still unfinished, despite his claim that morning that he would complete it. Another inconsistency in an increasingly puzzling day. "Harold!" Ethan called again, louder this time. No response. He peered through the kitchen window, but could see no movement inside. Harold's car was still in the driveway, and in this weather, at this hour, it seemed unlikely he would have gone anywhere on foot, especially without his coat. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed Harold's number. The call went straight to voicemail after several rings. A growing sense of unease settled in his stomach. As he put his phone away, the German shepherd suddenly began barking more intensely. At first, Ethan thought the dog was reacting to his presence, but as he observed more carefully, he realized The animal was directing its attention toward the small doghouse, alternating between barking and whining. Keeping a safe distance, Ethan moved to get a better angle on the doghouse. From his new position, he could see something he hadn't noticed before: a wooden panel in the floor of the structure that looked like it could be moved, with what appeared to be an unlocked padlock sitting on top of it. There was also a metallic glint that might be a handle of some sort embedded in the panel. Drawing on his experience with animals from his breeding days, Ethan approached the German Shepherd carefully, speaking in low, soothing tones. The dog, seemingly more distressed than aggressive, allowed Ethan to come close enough to unclip its chain from the collar and reattach it to a pole several feet away from the doghouse. With the dog secured at a safe distance, Ethan knelt down and peered inside the small structure. What he had initially taken for a simple doghouse floor was actually a sophisticated trapdoor. The metal handle and latch were reminiscent of old war bunkers he'd seen in historical documentaries. A cold feeling that had nothing to do with the winter air washed over him. Why would Harold have a bunker hidden beneath a doghouse? And why had he been so secretive and evasive all day? Ethan stood up and stepped back, his mind racing. He needed to talk to Claire. Fumbling with his phone, he dialed home. "Claire," he said when she answered, his voice tight with tension. "I found something strange in Harold's backyard. There's some kind of bunker or cellar under the doghouse." "A bunker?" Claire's surprise was evident. "What do you mean?" "There's a trap door in the floor of the doghouse with a handle and latch, like the kind you'd see in old war bunkers. The dog is still outside, chained up, and I can't find Harold anywhere. He's not answering his phone, and his car is still here." There was a pause before Claire responded. "That sounds concerning. Do you think he might be down there? Maybe he fell or got trapped somehow?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "The padlock on the door is unlocked, which means someone could be down there. But why would he build a doghouse over a bunker entrance? It doesn't make sense." "It could be dangerous," Claire warned. "Maybe we should call the police, just to be safe. Your phone battery was low earlier. I'll make the call." Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. "All right, but tell them it's just a welfare check. I'm worried Harold might be in trouble down there. I can't reach him, and his house is locked, but his car is here." "Promise me you won't go down there," Claire insisted. "Come home, and we'll wait for the police together." "I promise," Ethan agreed. "I'll be right back." He ended the call and cast one last look at the trapdoor. The rational part of him knew he should follow Claire's advice and wait for the authorities. But another part of him, the part that had been searching for answers for 8 long years, was drawn to the mystery beneath the doghouse. Before he could make a decision, a noise came from the bunker, a metallic sound like someone climbing a ladder or stairs. Ethan froze, his gaze fixed on the trapdoor, which remained closed. The sounds grew louder and clearer, unmistakably footsteps on metal rungs. Then, with a scraping noise, the wooden panel moved, and the padlock fell to the side as the lid opened. Harold emerged from the opening, crawling awkwardly out of the narrow space. When he straightened and saw Ethan standing there, his face registered pure shock, quickly followed by something darker. Fear? Anger? It was hard to tell in the dim light. "Ethan," Harold said, his voice carefully controlled, but with an undercurrent of tension. "What are you doing here?" Ethan held up the coat. "You left this at our house. When you didn't come back, I thought I'd bring it over." He paused, then added, "I was worried when you didn't answer the door, and then I heard the dog barking. It's still outside in the cold." Harold took the coat from Ethan's outstretched hand, with slow, deliberate movements. "Thanks. Yeah, about the dog. It's still not really warming up to me. I'm not so sure about bringing it inside anymore. I hope you understand." Ethan couldn't help himself. He looked pointedly at the open trapdoor. "What's down there, Harold?" Harold's posture stiffened, his expression guarded. "Nothing that concerns you." "I was looking for you," Ethan pressed. "I started to get worried when you didn't answer your phone or come to the door. Your car is here, but you weren't." Harold didn't respond directly to this. Instead, he glanced at the German Shepherd. "You moved my dog." "It was restless and kept barking at the bunker door," Ethan explained. "I moved it to calm it down." Harold's jaw tightened visibly. Ethan decided to be direct. "Why have you been lying to me all day, Harold? You said you'd bring your dog inside, but it's still out here. You said you were going to finish that larger doghouse this morning, but it's barely started. You claimed to be meeting friends when you went to the breeder alone." Ethan paused, studying Harold's increasingly agitated expression. What's really going on? For a moment, there was silence broken only by the sound of the wind and the occasional whine from the German Shepherd. Then, without warning, Harold lunged forward. Ethan barely had time to react before Harold slammed into him, grabbing his jacket and pushing him backward with unexpected strength. They grappled in the snow, Harold's face contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. "You should have minded your own business," Harold snarled, landing a solid punch to Ethan's midsection. The blow knocked the wind out of Ethan, but years of physical labor had kept him strong despite his grief. He managed to block Harold's neck swing and push the man off him. "What are you hiding, Harold?" Ethan demanded, circling warily now, keeping his distance. Harold didn't answer. Instead, he charged again, this time driving his knee into Ethan's stomach as they collided. Ethan doubled over, gasping, and Harold used the opportunity to shove him toward the open trapdoor. "Get in there!" Harold commanded, his voice eerily calm now despite the violence of his actions. "Crawl in and go down." Ethan straightened, wincing from the pain in his abdomen. "You can't make me go down there." A chilling smile spread across Harold's face as he reached behind his back and produced a handgun. "It's either you climb down yourself or I'll drop your dead body down. Your choice." The sight of the weapon sent a jolt of fear through Ethan, but he maintained his composure. "The police are on their way here, Harold. Claire called them when I couldn't find you. If you fire that gun, every neighbor will hear it." Frustration flashed across Harold's face, but he kept the gun trained on Ethan. Instead of shooting, he stepped forward and struck Ethan across the face with the weapon, sending him stumbling backward. Blood trickled from a cut above Ethan's eye as Harold continued to push him toward the doghouse, trying to force him to crawl into the narrow opening. Despite the pain and disorientation from the blow, Ethan fought back, grabbing Harold's wrist and twisting it until the gun fell from his grasp. In a desperate move, Ethan kicked the weapon, sending it sliding across the wooden floor of the doghouse and down into the darkness of the bunker below. Enraged, Harold charged again, but this time Ethan was ready. He sidestepped and used Harold's momentum against him, sending him crashing into the side of the doghouse. In the distance, the wail of police sirens cut through the night air. Harold's head snapped up at the sound, panic replacing rage in his expression. Moments later, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the house, their lights bathing the snowy yard in alternating red and blue. Officers emerged quickly, hands on their holsters, as they approached the scene of the struggle. "Police! Hands where we can see them!" one officer shouted. Both men raised their hands, though Harold did so reluctantly, his face a mask of frustration and defeat. The officers separated them, one checking Ethan's bleeding face, while the other restrained Harold. "What's going on here?" the first officer demanded. Before Ethan could respond, Claire appeared, having followed the police cars from their house. "Ethan, are you okay?" she called, hurrying toward him. "I'm fine," he assured her, though the cut above his eye was still bleeding freely. Ethan quickly explained to the officers what had happened, how Harold had acted strangely all day, how he discovered the bunker beneath the doghouse, and how Harold had attacked him when confronted. "He pulled a gun on me," Ethan added. "I managed to disarm him, but the weapon fell down into the bunker." The officers looked at Harold, who remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Is that true, sir?" one officer asked him. Did you assault this man and threaten him with a firearm?" Harold didn't respond. "We're going to have to take you in," the officer continued, reciting Harold's rights as his partner secured handcuffs around his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the officer continued the Miranda warning, another police car arrived, followed by an ambulance. Paramedics rushed to check Ethan's injuries, while additional officers secured the scene. One of the officers approached the open trapdoor, shining a flashlight down into the darkness below. "There appears to be some kind of underground room here," he reported, peering down. "I can see metal stairs leading down." Before anyone could respond, a noise emanated from within the bunker, the unmistakable sound of someone climbing the metal stairs. Everyone froze, officers immediately drawing their weapons and training them on the opening. The paramedic pulled Ethan back, and Claire gasped, clutching her husband's arm. The climbing sounds grew louder, more distinct with each passing second. Then, slowly, a figure began to emerge from the darkness. It was a boy, approximately 13 years old, with a mop of reddish hair that hadn't been cut in some time. He was thin, pale, and obviously frightened, his wide eyes blinking in the sudden brightness of the officer's flashlights. In his trembling hands, he held Harold's gun. The officers tensed, calling out for the boy to drop the weapon, but he seemed confused and terrified, pointing the gun wildly at the crowd of strangers surrounding him. "Dad!" the boy called out, his voice cracking with fear as his gaze found Harold. "I won't let the enemy catch you. I'll protect you, Dad, and our home." His hands shook violently as he gripped the weapon. "I want to be a soldier like you." The officers exchanged bewildered glances, maintaining their positions but clearly uncertain how to proceed with a clearly frightened child holding a deadly weapon. "Son, put the gun down," one officer said gently. "It's not safe for someone your age to handle that." The boy's finger twitched near the trigger. "I know how to use this," he insisted, his voice trembling. "Dad taught me. The country's at war. You're the enemy. You want to take Dad and our home." Ethan stared at the boy, a strange numbness spreading through his body that had nothing to do with his injuries. There was something hauntingly familiar about the child's features, the shape of his face, the color of his hair, the set of his jaw. "Joshua?" The name escaped Ethan's lips in a breathless whisper. The boy's eyes flickered toward him, confusion evident in his expression. Ethan stepped forward slowly, ignoring the paramedic's attempt to hold him back. "Joshua, what do you mean? We're not in a war, and Harold is not your father." He swallowed hard, hardly daring to hope. "Your mother and I are your parents." The boy's confusion deepened, his hands trembling more violently now. "You're lying," he said, though there was uncertainty in his voice. "You just want to kill us. You hate us." His voice broke. "My mom died in a war. Dad said she was shot by the military." Claire stepped forward now, tears streaming down her face. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and showed the boy the screen, her wallpaper unchanged for 8 years, showing a 5-year-old Joshua smiling widely at the camera. "You were kidnapped," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've been searching for you all these years. We missed you so much, Joshua." The boy stared at the phone, his resolve visibly wavering. He looked at Harold, silently pleading for guidance or explanation, but Harold refused to meet his gaze, staring resolutely at the ground. Taking advantage of the boy's distraction, one of the officers gently approached and carefully took the gun from his unresisting hands, quickly securing and disarming it. Joshua didn't resist. He continued to stare at the photo on Claire's phone, confusion and the first glimmers of recognition washing over his face. "We're really not in a war?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "No, sweetheart," Claire assured him, fighting to keep her voice steady. "There's no war. Harold, he pretended all these years to be your father when your real father and mother We're searching everywhere for you." Claire stepped closer, cautiously reaching out to touch Joshua's hand. The boy flinched initially, but didn't pull away, allowing the contact. It was as though some deep-buried memory was stirring within him, responding to his mother's touch. The paramedics moved in, wrapping Joshua in a shock blanket and guiding him toward the ambulance. Claire followed closely, unwilling to let her son out of her sight again. Ethan watched them go, his heart pounding with a mixture of shock, joy, and disbelief. One of the officers approached him. "Sir, we need to ask you and your wife some questions, but first, let's get your injuries treated." Ethan nodded numbly, his gaze fixed on the ambulance where his long-lost son was being examined. After 8 years of searching, of hoping against hope, Joshua had been just across the street the entire time. The following hours passed in a blur for Ethan. Paramedics cleaned and bandaged the cut above his eye and examined his bruised ribs, concluding that nothing was broken. Physically, he would recover quickly. Emotionally, he was still processing the miraculous turn of events. In the back of the ambulance, Joshua sat wrapped in blankets, answering basic questions from both medical personnel and police officers. The boy's confusion was evident. His entire worldview had been shattered in a matter of minutes. When Ethan approached, Joshua regarded him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Claire sat beside their son, not touching him, but close enough to offer comfort if he wanted it. "How are you feeling?" Ethan asked gently, careful not to overwhelm him. Joshua shrugged, his eyes darting between Ethan and the officers nearby. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything's different than what Harold told me." One of the officers, a kind-faced woman who had introduced herself as Detective Martinez, sat across from Joshua with a notepad. "Joshua, I know this is confusing, but can you tell us a little about what it was like living with Harold? Did he ever hurt you?" Joshua shook his head. "He was just training me really hard, physical training, and recently how to use the gun." He paused, frowning. "He said I needed to learn to protect myself for when he wasn't there anymore. He said the war would last a long time, told me to hide deep in the bunker because things got worse out there." "Do you know what year it is, Joshua?" Detective Martinez asked gently. The boy hesitated. "Dad, Harold, said it doesn't matter down there. Time works differently during wartime." "It's 2007, the detective informed him. "You've been missing for 8 years. Do you remember anything about where you lived before the bunker?" Joshua's brow furrowed in concentration. I don't know. I've been in the bunker for as long as I can remember. Harold said it was too dangerous outside because of the war." He looked around at the peaceful, if snowy neighborhood. "But there is no war, is there?" "No," Ethan confirmed softly. "There's no war. There never was." From the police car where Harold was being held, they could see him watching them, his expression unreadable. Another officer approached the ambulance. "We found something interesting in the bunker," he reported. "It's fully stocked with supplies, food, water, medical equipment. There's a generator, air filtration system, even educational materials. And we found several silent firearms, just as the boy mentioned." Detective Martinez nodded. "Sounds like he was prepared for a long stay down there." She turned back to Joshua. "Did Harold ever let you leave the bunker?" Joshua shook his head. "Never. He said it was too dangerous. He went out for supplies sometimes and said he was helping other people who were hiding from the war. He told me that when I was old enough, I could help him." Ethan's mind reeled at the implications. Harold had kept Joshua imprisoned for 8 years, constructing an elaborate lie about a fictional war to keep him compliant and afraid to leave. "The dog," Ethan said suddenly, remembering what had started this chain of events. "He bought the German Shepherd to guard the entrance to the bunker, didn't he? And he was building the larger doghouse to better conceal the trapdoor." Detective Martinez nodded. "That's our theory as well. Looks like he was having trouble keeping Joshua confined as he got older and more curious. The dog was meant to be another layer of security. As they talked, a forensic team arrived and began processing both the bunker and Harold's house. Officers cordoned off the property with yellow crime scene tape, and curious neighbors had begun to gather, despite the late hour and cold weather. Eventually, the paramedics decided that Joshua should be taken to the hospital for a full medical examination. Years of living underground with limited sunlight and exercise would have had effects on his development that needed to be assessed. "Can we go with him?" Claire asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Please, we just found him." The paramedics agreed, and soon they were headed to Maple Hollow Memorial Hospital, Ethan and Claire riding alongside their son. They maintained a respectful distance, understanding that for Joshua, they were still essentially strangers, despite the biological connection. At the hospital, doctors conducted a thorough examination while Ethan and Claire waited anxiously. Detective Martinez joined them, her expression grave. "Harold's not saying much, but from what we've pieced together and what Joshua's told us, it seems he kidnapped your son the day he went missing. He happened to have that old war bunker on his property and built the dog kennel right on top of it, though we're not sure why. Possibly as a response to his own family tragedy." Ethan nodded. "His wife and son were killed in a home invasion 10 years ago. He was never the same after that." "That likely triggered whatever mental break led to this," the detective agreed. Claire wiped away tears. 8 years of lies. Our poor boy doesn't even know what the world is really like. "The psychological recovery will be challenging," Detective Martinez acknowledged. "But children are remarkably resilient. With proper support and therapy, he has every chance of adapting to normal life again." Dr. Patel, the pediatrician who had examined Joshua, approached them with a clipboard in hand. "Physically, he's malnourished and shows signs of vitamin D deficiency, which is expected given the circumstances. His muscle development is below average for his age, but there are no signs of physical abuse. He appears to have been fed regularly and kept in relatively sanitary conditions." Claire covered her mouth, fighting back a sob of relief. Ethan put his arm around her, drawing her close. "Can we see him?" he asked. Dr. Patel nodded. "Yes, but please understand that he's still processing everything. He's asked some questions about you, which is a positive sign, but don't expect immediate recognition or affection. This will take time." They found Joshua sitting up in a hospital bed, looking small and lost among the white sheets. When they entered, he looked up, his expression cautious but no longer fearful. "Hi," Claire said softly, stopping at a respectful distance from the bed. "Hi," Joshua replied, studying her face. You're really my mom?" Claire nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "And you're my real dad?" Joshua asked, turning to Ethan. "Yes," Ethan confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been looking for you ever since you disappeared. We never gave up hope." Joshua seemed to consider this. "Harold, he told me my mom died, and that everyone outside was an enemy." He frowned. Why would he lie like that? Ethan exchanged a glance with Claire, unsure how much to explain. "Harold lost his own family a long time ago," he said carefully. "I think he was very sad and confused. He did a very wrong thing by taking you and lying to you." "Am I going to live with you now?" Joshua asked, a hint of anxiety in his voice. "Yes, if that's okay with you," Claire assured him. "We still have your room just the way it was, but nothing has to happen too quickly. We can take it one day at a time." Joshua nodded slowly. I don't remember you," he admitted, his voice small. "But when I saw your picture—" He trailed off, uncertain. "It's okay," Ethan assured him. "We have plenty of time to get to know each other again." In the days that followed, the story of Joshua's discovery and Harold's deception spread throughout Maple Hollow. Local reporters clamored for interviews with the family that had been miraculously reunited after 8 years. Ethan and Claire declined all interview requests, focusing instead on helping Joshua adjust to his new reality. They brought family albums to the hospital, showing him pictures of his early childhood and telling him stories about his life before the kidnapping. Harold was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, and multiple weapons violations. In the wake of his arrest, investigators discovered journals in the bunker detailing his deteriorating mental state over the years and his obsession with creating a second-chance family after losing his own. Watching his son now, Ethan felt a profound mixture of grief for the years lost and gratitude for this second chance. The road ahead would not be easy. Joshua would need intensive therapy to overcome years of isolation and deception. But they were together again. After 8 years of searching, of hoping against hope, their family was finally whole. After 8 years of agonizing uncertainty, Ethan and Claire Coulter discovered their missing son Joshua imprisoned in a hidden bunker beneath their neighbor's dog kennel. A horrifying revelation that shattered the quiet facade of their small Minnesota town. Joshua was deeply traumatized after spending his entire childhood in captivity, but his parents were determined to help him heal and rebuild a future. Yet even with his kidnapper behind bars, their nightmare wasn't over. The family would be separated, and their hopes shattered once again in unexpected ways no one could have seen coming. Before we dive into part 2 of this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harriet Brennan delivered her final verdict, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a physical presence. Harold Stevens, for the crimes of kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and assault with a deadly weapon, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in a federal correctional facility without the possibility of parole. The gavel struck with finality, its sharp crack echoing through the hushed chamber. At 55 years old, Harold would likely spend the remainder of his life behind bars. Ethan Coulter felt Claire's hand tighten around his own as they sat in the front row of the gallery. Beside them, their son Joshua, now 13 years old, stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. The boy had insisted on attending the sentencing, despite his therapist's concerns about potential trauma triggers. "It's over now," Claire whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. But was it? 8 months had passed since that snowy night when Ethan had discovered the hidden bunker beneath Harold's dog kennel. 8 months of therapy sessions, police interviews, and court appearances. 8 months of trying to rebuild what had been shattered 8 years ago. As bailiffs led Harold away in handcuffs, the convicted man turned briefly, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom until it landed on Joshua. For a fleeting moment, something passed between them, a final wordless exchange that made Ethan's skin crawl. Then Harold was gone, disappearing through the side door that led to the courthouse holding cells. Ethan placed his arm around Joshua's shoulders. "He can't hurt you anymore," he said gently. "You're safe now." Joshua nodded, though the tension in his small frame didn't subside. "Tomorrow we'll be in our new home," Ethan continued, trying to inject optimism into his voice. "Today we'll finish packing, and the movers will pick everything up in the morning. A fresh start for all of us." As they made their way out of the courtroom, a tall, broad-shouldered man approached them in the corridor. Ethan recognized him immediately as Rodridge Thompson, owner of Northwoods Kennels, the local dog breeder where Harold had purchased the German Shepherd that was meant to guard Joshua's prison. "Mr. and Mrs. Coulter," Rodridge greeted them, his smile revealing a row of perfectly straight teeth. He extended his hand to Ethan. "I just wanted to congratulate you on the verdict. 25 years. Seems the judge's decision pleased everyone in the community." Ethan shook his hand, noting the firmness of Rodridge's grip. "Thank you. After all this ugliness, maybe our little neighborhood can get back to being the peaceful place it was known for," Rodridge continued. "Maple Hollow has always been such a tight-knit, safe community. At least, that's what I always thought before. Well, before all this." "We appreciate your testimony during the trial," Claire said politely. The way you described Harold's unusual behavior when purchasing the dog helped establish his state of mind. Rodridge waved a dismissive hand. Just doing my civic duty. That man needed to be put away, and I'm glad I could help make that happen. He paused, glancing around before lowering his voice slightly. I noticed the "For Sale" sign outside your property. Are you folks really leaving Maple Hollow? Ethan nodded. We've already purchased a house in Lakeview. It's not too far, about 40 miles east, but far enough to give us some distance. Joshua needs it. We all do. I certainly understand that, Rodridge said, his expression sympathetic. When are you planning to move? Tomorrow morning, Claire answered. The movers are scheduled to arrive at 8. Rodridge's eyebrows lifted in surprise. So soon? You know, if I'd known you were moving this quickly, I could have offered my services. I recently expanded my business ventures. In addition to the dog breeding operation, I've started a moving company. Makes sense, really. I already have the trucks and logistics connections from transporting dogs to shows and clients. Ethan blinked, taken aback by the sudden business pitch. That's enterprising of you. I'd be happy to handle your move, Rodridge continued eagerly. As a gesture of goodwill and friendship, I'd do it free of charge. Consider it my contribution to helping your family move forward. That's very generous, Claire said, but we've already hired Lakeview movers. We've paid the deposit and everything is arranged. Rodridge leaned in conspiratorially. You can always cancel with them. Even with a cancellation fee, my offer would save you thousands. I know how much this trial and all the legal fees must have strained your finances. Ethan and Claire exchanged glances. It was true. The past 8 months had been financially devastating. Between therapy costs not fully covered by insurance, legal consultations, and lost income from taking time off work, their savings had dwindled alarmingly. We'll consider it, Ethan said carefully. Thank you for the offer. Excellent, Rodridge beamed. If you decide to accept, just stop by the kennel office today. The sooner the better, so I can arrange the logistics for tomorrow morning. He handed Ethan a business card. This could save you a significant amount of money. As Rodridge turned to leave, Joshua suddenly clutched at Ethan's shirt sleeve. Dad, he whispered urgently, pointing toward a woman walking briskly toward the courthouse exit. That's Mirai. Ethan looked up, but the woman had already pushed through the glass doors and was disappearing down the courthouse steps. Who? He asked, turning back to his son. Joshua's face had gone pale. Mirai. I saw her with Harold before. Claire knelt beside him, concern etched across her features. Honey, are you sure? You've never mentioned anyone named Mirai before? I only saw her once, Joshua insisted, his eyes still fixed on the doors where the woman had vanished. But I remember her face. Before they could follow, their lawyer approached with a stack of documents requiring signatures to formalize the conclusion of the criminal proceedings. By the time they finished and made their way to the parking lot, there was no sign of the mysterious woman. As they drove home, Claire turned in her seat to face Joshua in the back. You're safe now, sweetie, she assured him. No one can harm you anymore. Anyone who might have bad intentions would think twice after seeing how severe the punishment was for Harold. That's right, Ethan agreed, glancing at his son in the rearview mirror. As long as we stick together, we'll be safe. And once we're in our new home, we can truly start fresh. Joshua stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of Maple Hollow slip past. Can we move even further away? He asked quietly. Like to a different state? Ethan sighed, feeling the familiar weight of guilt and inadequacy press down on him. I'm sorry, buddy. My job at the engineering firm still requires me to be based in northern Minnesota, but Lakeview is a bigger town with better security systems in the new house. No one there knows our story. Unless they watched the news, he thought grimly, but kept that to himself. As they turned onto their street, the first flutters of snow began to fall from the gray February sky. a gentle reminder that winter wasn't quite ready to release its grip on Maple Hollow. As they approached their house, Ethan was surprised to see a cluster of people gathered on their front lawn, holding colorful balloons and a large banner that read, "Congratulations, Coulter family. Justice prevailed." "What's all this?" Claire murmured, a smile spreading across her face. Ethan pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. As they stepped out of the car, their neighbors burst into applause. Martha Jenkins, who lived 2 doors down, rushed forward to embrace Claire. "We wanted to celebrate with you," she explained, her eyes brimming with tears. "The whole neighborhood has been following the trial, and we're all so relieved that Monster will be locked away for good." More neighbors came forward, offering hugs, handshakes, and words of support. Someone had set up a table with cookies and punch on the front lawn, and children whom Joshua had once played with, now 8 years older, hovered awkwardly nearby, unsure how to interact with the boy they barely recognized. Ethan watched as Joshua shrank away from the attention, edging closer to the house. Despite months of therapy, large gatherings still overwhelmed him, a lasting effect of his years in isolation. "Thank you all so much," Ethan addressed the crowd, genuine gratitude in his voice. "Your support means everything to us, but as you know, we're moving tomorrow and we still have quite a bit of packing to do." Several neighbors immediately volunteered to help, but Ethan politely declined, explaining that they had a system in place and were nearly finished. The gathering gradually shifted into a more relaxed social event, with neighbors reminiscing about happier times in the community and expressing their hopes for the Coulters' future. Claire moved from group to group, thanking everyone individually for their kindness. Ethan tried to keep an eye on Joshua while also participating in conversations, but after about 10 minutes, he realized he hadn't seen his son for several minutes. "Claire," he called out, interrupting her conversation with Mrs. Potter from across the street. "Have you seen Joshua?" Claire's expression immediately shifted from pleasant sociality to maternal concern. "He was just here a moment ago." She scanned the gathering frantically. Joshua! Joshua! A cold dread settled in Ethan's stomach as he broke away from the group circling the house. "Joshua!" he called, his voice growing more urgent. Then he spotted him, a small figure standing in the backyard of Harold's house across the street, the yellow police tape still cordoning off the property, fluttering in the breeze around him. "Joshua!" Ethan called, jogging across the street and ducking under the police tape. "What are you doing? You can't be here." Joshua stood near the infamous dog kennel, staring at it with an unsettling intensity. When he turned to face his father, his expression was eerily calm. "I need to get some guns from the bunker," he said matter-of-factly. "I don't feel safe." The statement hit Ethan like a physical blow. He knelt beside his son, placing his hands gently on the boy's shoulders. "Joshua, listen to me. There are no guns down there anymore. The police cleared everything out months ago." He pulled his son into a protective embrace. "I understand why you're feeling unsafe. All those people, the excitement, it must be overwhelming." Joshua leaned into his father's embrace, his small body trembling slightly. I don't like it when there are too many friends watching me. And that woman, Mireille, from the courthouse." "I know, buddy," Ethan said softly. "Look, your mom is already sending everyone home." He gestured across the street where Claire was indeed politely but firmly thanking the neighbors and suggesting they wrap up the gathering. "Why don't we head back? We can have a quiet evening, just the 3 of us." Joshua nodded, and they began walking back toward the street. As they passed the yellow police tape again, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of Harold's house. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out, early 30s, with shoulder-length dark hair and designer sunglasses despite the overcast day. Joshua's hand suddenly clamped down on Ethan's with surprising strength. Ethan glanced down to see his son's face had drained of color. The woman approached them with a confident stride. "Excuse me," she called, removing her sunglasses to reveal striking hazel eyes. "I'm looking for Harold Stevens's residence. Is this it?" Before Ethan could respond, Joshua whispered, "That's her, Dad." "That's Mireille." Ethan instinctively positioned himself slightly in front of his son. "Yes, this was Harold's house," he confirmed cautiously. "May I ask who you are and what your business is here?" The woman extended her hand. "I'm Mireille Choi. I suppose I was Harold's girlfriend?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Ex-girlfriend now, obviously." Ethan didn't take her hand. "You were at the courthouse earlier." Mireille withdrew her hand, her composure never wavering. "Yes, I attended the sentencing. I've been trying to contact Harold for months, but he never answered my calls. I only found out what happened a few days ago when I saw the news." "Joshua knows who you are," Ethan said bluntly. "He says he saw you with Harold before." A flicker of confusion crossed Mireille's face. "That's impossible. I never—" She trailed off as Claire approached, having noticed the confrontation from across the street. "Is everything all right?" Claire asked, her gaze moving between Ethan, Joshua, and the stranger. "This is Mireille," Ethan explained. "Apparently, she was Harold's girlfriend." Claire's eyes widened. "Harold had a girlfriend?" Mireille smiled politely. "We met online about a year ago. We were in a long-distance relationship. I live in Milwaukee. I'm just here to check on the house. I had no idea about any of this until recently." Joshua suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling with emotion. "You're lying. I saw you with him in the bunker." Mireille's expression shifted from polite confusion to genuine surprise. I did visit the bunker once, about a month ago. Harold showed it to me when I came to visit, but I never saw a child down there. If I had, I would have called the police immediately." Claire stepped closer to Joshua, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "Joshua, did you ever call out to her for help?" Joshua shook his head. "I trusted Harold. He told me he was my father." His voice dropped to a whisper. "He locked me in a room and said it was to keep me safe from the enemy. But I saw her through the small window in the door. Harold took her to another room, and I heard strange noises. I thought he was punishing the enemy. He kept saying her name, Mireille." Mireille's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Oh, yes, Harold took me to a separate room in the bunker. We did what adults do." She cleared her throat awkwardly. "I thought the bunker was fascinating, like something from a Cold War movie. But I swear I had no idea he was keeping a child down there." Ethan studied her face, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. Her embarrassment seemed genuine, but something about her story still didn't sit right with him. "It's not your fault if you didn't know," Claire said finally, her voice gentle but cautious. "Harold was very secretive. Even we had no idea what was happening right across the street from us." Mireille's expression softened with relief. "I can't imagine what you've all been through. When I heard the news, I was absolutely horrified. I came here partly to see the house, but also to express my condolences to your family. If I had noticed anything suspicious that day, anything at all." "Would you like to come inside our house?" Claire asked suddenly. "We could talk more comfortably there." Ethan shot his wife a surprised look, but she met his gaze with a meaningful one of her own. He recognized the silent message. Better to keep this woman close until they understood her connection to Harold more clearly. "That's very kind," Mireille said with a grateful smile. Ethan checked his watch. "We should get going soon, Claire. Joshua has therapy in half an hour." "Of course," Claire nodded, "but we have time for a quick cup of tea, at least." As they crossed the street toward their house, Ethan noticed the unease that had taken hold of his son, and he was determined to set this straight. Once inside their home, Ethan guided Joshua upstairs to change clothes for his therapy appointment. The boy's room was half-packed with labeled boxes stacked neatly against one wall and his essential items laid out on the bed for the morning move. "Dad," Joshua said as soon as the bedroom door closed behind them. "She's lying. She saw me in the bunker. She looked right at me through the door window." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, gesturing for Joshua to join him. "I want to believe you, son," he said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on his son's knee. "But we need to consider all possibilities. Harold might have told her you were his son. Maybe she thought you were just playing down there or something." Joshua frowned, considering this. "She didn't seem surprised to see me, though. She just looked at me and then followed Harold into the other room." "Did she ever say anything threatening to you, or show any sign that she wanted to hurt you?" Joshua shook his head. "Number. She just came that one time. They went into the room, and later I heard them leave together. I never saw her again until today." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Without concrete evidence, there's not much we can report to the police about her. She could be another victim in all this, manipulated by Harold just like you were." He helped Joshua change into fresh clothes, observing the boy's movements with quiet concern. Although Joshua had physically recovered from his years of captivity, psychological scars remained evident in his cautious demeanor and persistent hypervigilance. "Ready to head downstairs?" Ethan asked, straightening Joshua's collar. The boy nodded, and they made their way back to the first floor. In the living room, Claire and Mireille sat on opposite ends of the sofa, deep in conversation over steaming mugs of tea. "Always had such rigid schedules," Mireille was saying. "Our video calls were strictly at 8 o'clock every Wednesday and Sunday evening. He would never allow me to text or call outside those times. I thought it was because of his work schedule, but now I wonder." Claire nodded sympathetically. Harold created elaborate systems to maintain control. The fictional war, the strict rules, it was all part of his psychological manipulation. Ethan cleared his throat gently from the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to get going to make Joshua's appointment on time." "Of course," Claire said, setting down her mug. She turned to Mireille. "Thank you for being so open with us. It helps us understand the full picture of what happened." Mireille stood, smoothing her designer slacks. "Thank you for the tea and conversation. I know this has been an unimaginably difficult time for your family." After exchanging polite goodbyes, Ethan and Joshua headed out to the car. As they pulled away from the house, Ethan noticed Mireille watching them from the front porch, her expression inscrutable. "What do you think of her story?" Joshua asked quietly as they drove. Ethan chose his words carefully. "I think there are still a lot of questions to be answered, but right now, let's focus on your therapy session. That's the most important thing today." As they approached the commercial district where Northwood's Kennels was located, Ethan remembered Rodridge's offer about the moving service. As they passed the kennel, he noticed two muscular men loading a German Shepherd into a black SUV, the dog remarkably similar to the one Harold had purchased. Could that be the same dog? Ethan wondered aloud, remembering that police had returned the animal to the breeder after completing their investigation. Joshua followed his gaze, his body tensing visibly at the sight of the German Shepherd. "I don't want to look at it," he said, turning away. Ethan silently cursed himself for drawing attention to the dog. "I'm sorry, buddy. You're right. Let's not think about that anymore." He reached for his phone and dialed Lakeview Movers, quickly explaining that he needed to cancel their services for the following day. The representative informed him that he would lose the 25% deposit, but confirmed the cancellation. "I need to stop by Rodridge's office to confirm our moving arrangements for tomorrow," Ethan told Joshua as they neared the therapy clinic. "I'll make it quick and be back before your session ends. But if I'm running a little late, just wait inside the building, okay? It's a safe place." Joshua nodded solemnly. "I can be brave." The simple statement, delivered with such earnest determination, made Ethan's heart ache. No 13-year-old should have to consciously remind themselves to be brave during a routine therapy appointment. After dropping Joshua off at the clinic and confirming with the receptionist that he would keep an eye on him, Ethan drove back to Northwood's Kennels. The SUV with the German Shepherd was gone when he arrived, and as he entered the facility, he was struck by how empty it seemed. Only a handful of smaller dogs remained in the previously bustling kennels. Rodridge emerged from his office, wiping his hands on a towel. "Ethan, good to see you. I take it you're here about my offer?" "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "I've just canceled with Lakeview Movers." Rodridge smiled broadly. "Excellent decision. You won't regret it." He gestured around the nearly empty facility. "As you can see, I've already started downsizing the breeding operation. After the police investigation and everything that happened with Harold, I've been reevaluating my business priorities. Dog breeding in this small town just isn't as profitable as it once was." "I notice there aren't many dogs left," Ethan commented. "I've moved most of them to a new location. I'm planning to convert this building into a logistics and warehouse facility, focusing more on the moving business." Ethan nodded, absently scanning the few remaining kennels. "I saw 2 men leaving with a German Shepherd earlier. Was that the same dog that Harold purchased?" Rodridge shook his head. No. Harold's dog has been relocated. Those men were clients who board their dog here occasionally when they travel. They just picked him up today after a 2-week stay." Changing the subject, Rodridge steered Ethan toward his office. "Now, about tomorrow's move. Have you considered my offer? I'm happy to handle everything free of charge. My way of helping your family after everything you've been through." "That's very generous," Ethan said, "but I'd like to pay you something." "It doesn't seem right to accept such a significant service completely free." Rodridge waved dismissively. "Please, I insist. Consider it my contribution to your fresh start. You've been through enough, financially, emotionally, in every way possible." He pulled out a folder containing paperwork for Ethan to read and sign. As Ethan began reviewing the documents, Rodridge's phone rang. "Excuse me," he said, stepping outside to take the call. Through the office window, Ethan could see Rodridge speaking animatedly into his phone. Though he couldn't hear the conversation, the breeder's body language conveyed clear agitation. He paced back and forth, repeatedly running a hand through his hair and gesturing sharply with his free arm. When Rodridge noticed Ethan watching, he quickly composed himself and ended the call, returning to the office with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that," he said smoothly. "A customer complaining about finding fleas on their dog after boarding here. Ridiculous accusation. We maintain impeccable hygiene standards." He glanced at the paperwork. "All signed?" "Excellent. We'll be at your house at 8 tomorrow morning." Ethan stood, extending his hand. "Thank you again for your help. I should get back to pick up Joshua from his therapy session." As he drove away from Northwood's Kennels, Ethan couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Rodridge's explanation about the phone call had seemed plausible enough, but his reaction had been disproportionately intense for a simple customer complaint, and the way he'd avoided discussing Harold's dog in detail. Ethan pushed the thoughts aside, attributing his suspicions to hypervigilance, a protective instinct that had been on high alert since Joshua's rescue. Right now, his priority was picking up his son and focusing on their family's fresh start. When Ethan arrived at the therapy clinic, he was surprised to find the waiting room empty. The receptionist looked up from his computer with a puzzled expression when Ethan asked about Joshua. "He finished his session about 10 minutes ago," the young man explained. "He waited here for a few minutes, and then I assumed he saw your car because he walked out quite confidently." A cold wave of panic washed over Ethan. "I just got here. My car wasn't outside." The receptionist's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think to double-check. He just seemed so certain when he left." "Which way did he go?" Ethan demanded, already backing toward the door. "I'm not sure. He just went out the front door." Ethan rushed outside, frantically scanning the parking lot and adjacent businesses. "Joshua!" he called, his voice cracking with fear. "Joshua!" He sprinted to the convenience store next door, frantically asking the cashier if they'd seen a 13-year-old boy with reddish hair. The clerk shook his head apologetically, and Ethan moved on to the next business, and the next, each negative response increasing his desperation. Back in his car, Ethan circled the block, driving slowly while scanning every alley and doorway. If Joshua had left with someone, they couldn't have gotten far in just 10 minutes. His fingers fumbled with his phone, prepared to call Detective Martinez, when the device rang in his hand, the detective's name flashing on the screen. "Detective," Ethan answered immediately. "Joshua is missing from his therapy appointment. I think someone—" "Mr. Coulter," Detective Martinez interrupted, her voice grave. "I need you to come home immediately. There's been an incident involving your wife." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "What? What happened to Claire? And my son is missing." "We'll discuss it when you get here. I will have officers searching the area around the clinic for Joshua, but you need to get back to your house now." Ethan's mind reeled, torn between continuing his search for Joshua and rushing home to Claire. "I can't just abandon my search for—" "Mr. Coulter," Detective Martinez cut in firmly, "we will have officers all over the area looking for your son. Right now, your wife needs you." The drive home was a blur, Ethan's hands shaking on the steering wheel as worst-case scenarios cascaded through his mind. When he turned onto his street, the flashing lights of police cars and an ambulance confirmed his fears. He barely remembered parking or exiting his vehicle, only the sight of paramedics wheeling Claire on a stretcher toward the ambulance, her face ghostly pale. "Claire!" he shouted, rushing to her side. Blood matted her blonde hair, and a pressure bandage on her abdomen was already soaked crimson. Despite her semi-conscious state, her eyes flickered open at the sound of his voice. A paramedic intercepted him. "Sir, your wife has been shot in the abdomen and sustained blunt force trauma to the head. She has multiple bleeding sites, and we need to transport her immediately." Claire's hand weakly reached for Ethan's. "Find him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They wanted to take our son." Her eyes closed again as the paramedics continued their urgent work. "They?" Ethan repeated, confusion mixing with horror. "Who's they?" The paramedic gently but firmly moved him aside. "Sir, we need to get her to the hospital now. Her condition is critical." As they loaded Claire into the ambulance, Ethan stood frozen, torn between going with his wife and searching for his son. Claire seemed to sense his dilemma. With what appeared to be the last of her strength, she shook her head and whispered again, "Find him." Detective Martinez approached as the ambulance doors closed. "Mr. Coulter, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to focus. Did your wife mention anyone named Mireille to you?" Ethan's head snapped up. "Mireille was at our house earlier today. She claimed to be Harold's girlfriend." His eyes widened with sudden realization. "You think she took Joshua?" "Your wife managed to tell us that after Mireille left, 2 men entered your home," the detective explained. "She was too weak to provide details, but we're working on the assumption that these incidents are connected." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process this new information. "I didn't see any men. The only person I saw at the breeder was Rodridge and—" He trailed off, remembering the 2 muscular men loading the German Shepherd into their SUV. "What is it?" Detective Martinez prompted. "There were 2 men at Northwood's Kennels earlier, picking up a German Shepherd. Rodridge said they were clients who boarded their dog there." The detective made a note on her pad. "We'll follow up on that. In the meantime, we've already sent officers to check Harold's bunker again, but they found no sign of recent activity, no new fingerprints or disturbances." What would these people want with Joshua? "And why attack Claire?" Ethan asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "It could be revenge," Detective Martinez suggested grimly. Or perhaps they're trying to dismantle your family piece by piece? We're exploring all possibilities. Another officer stepped forward, holding an evidence bag with what looked like animal fur. "We found these hairs on the living room carpet," he said. "They appear to be from a dog, but we'll need to confirm." Ethan's earlier suspicion crystallized into certainty. "Those men I saw at the breeder, they must be involved in this. They had a German shepherd that looked identical to the one Harold bought." As they were still trying to wrap their heads around the chain of events, Detective Martinez's radio crackled to life with an incoming message. She listened intently, her expression growing even more grave. "The woman, Mireille, just turned herself in at the station. She's armed and demanding to be placed in the same cell as Harold." Ethan stared at the detective in disbelief. "What? But why would she do that after— I need to talk to her. She knows where Joshua is." "My officers will handle the interrogation," Detective Martinez began, but Ethan cut her off. "You don't understand. I lost my son for 8 years while police conducted their investigation. In the end, I was the one who found him. I won't stand by and wait again." Detective Martinez studied him for a moment before nodding reluctantly. "All right, you can come to the station, but you'll observe the questioning, not participate. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Ethan agreed, already heading toward his car. If Mireille knew anything about Joshua's whereabouts, he would make sure she revealed it, one way or another. The Maple Hollow police station hummed with unusual activity as officers coordinated their response to what was now a kidnapping and attempted murder investigation. Detective Martinez had immediately mobilized roadblocks at all major exits from town and alerted neighboring communities to be on lookout for Joshua or the suspicious men with the German shepherd. As Ethan followed the detective through the station, he caught sight of Mireille being processed at the booking desk. Her composed demeanor from earlier had completely vanished, replaced by a wild, almost manic energy that made her seem like an entirely different person. Unable to contain himself, Ethan broke away from Detective Martinez and approached the booking area. "Where is he?" he demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "Where's my son?" Mireille looked up, a disturbing smile spreading across her face. "By now the dog would have gotten to him," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Rodridge kept it hungry enough for proper revenge, but I was better than him." The mention of the dog sent a bolt of terror through Ethan. Before he could lunge across the desk, an officer intervened, pulling him back. "That's enough," the officer warned Mireille. "Save it for the interrogation room." Detective Martinez ushered Ethan away as 2 officers escorted Mireille toward an interrogation room. "I understand your anger," she said firmly, "but antagonizing her won't help us find Joshua faster." "I can't just sit here while they interrogate her," Ethan said, pacing the narrow corridor. "Every second matters. What if the dog is actually with Joshua right now? We haven't heard a word from the officers you sent to look for him." Detective Martinez placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "My officers are trained for situations like this. We'll relay the new information to the team in the field, and the interrogation unit will get what we need from her." But Ethan couldn't accept that. The memory of 8 years of helpless waiting while police investigations went nowhere was too fresh, too painful. "I'm sorry," he said, backing toward the exit. "I can't do this again. I'll be out there looking for my son." "Mr. Coulter," Detective Martinez called after him, but Ethan was already running toward the parking lot. In his car, Ethan tried to think logically despite his mounting panic. Where would kidnappers take a child if they wanted to harm him? Not somewhere public where they might be seen. Somewhere isolated, but still accessible by car. He decided to start by retracing his route to the therapy clinic, searching the surrounding area more thoroughly. As he drove, he scanned every alley, every abandoned lot, every secluded spot where someone might temporarily hide a child. Finding nothing, Ethan expanded his search outward, driving in expanding circles through Maple Hollow. He passed by factories, strip malls, and residential neighborhoods, all the while fighting against the tightening knot of dread in his stomach. The eastern outskirts of town, where Maple Hollow gave way to dense forest and scattered farms, seemed a likely area for someone seeking isolation. Ethan turned onto a rural road that followed the winding path of the Blackwater River. The area was sparsely populated, with ramshackle hunting cabins and the occasional homestead breaking up the otherwise uninterrupted wilderness. As he rounded a bend, Ethan spotted two figures on the side of the road, an elderly woman and a young boy, waving their arms frantically. He slammed on the brakes, hope surging through him until he realized the child was much younger than Joshua, perhaps 7 or 8. Ethan pulled over, and the woman rushed toward his car, pure terror etched across her weathered face. "Please, please help us!" she cried, her voice thin and reedy with fear. "There's a dog, a vicious dog chasing us." Ethan looked past her and saw it, a German shepherd running full tilt down the road toward them, no leash or handler in sight. The animal's mouth was open, revealing sharp and red teeth, its powerful body moving with predatory purpose. Without hesitation, Ethan flung open his passenger door. "Get in! Quick!" The woman and child scrambled into his car, and Ethan locked the doors just as the dog reached them, leaping at the passenger window with a savage bark. The animal circled the vehicle, snapping at the tires and windows before it ran back toward the riverside. "Thank God you stopped," the woman gasped, clutching the boy protectively. Her clothes were ragged, her appearance suggesting someone living on the margins of society. "We saw it attack a child down by the river. When it spotted us, it started chasing us, too." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. A child? Where? Was he okay? "Down by the old bridge tunnel," the woman said, pointing through the windshield toward a concrete structure spanning the river about a quarter-mile ahead. The poor boy was screaming something awful. We were too far away to help him. Ethan immediately reached for his phone, dialing Detective Martinez. When she answered, he spoke urgently. "I think I've found Joshua. He's by the old river bridge on East County Road 7, and there's a German shepherd attacking him. I have 2 witnesses who saw it. Please send ambulances and animal control immediately." "Stay where you are," the detective ordered. "Units are on their way. If that dog is as dangerous as Mirai implied, it's not safe for you to approach." "The dog is on Briar Ridge Road. It was chasing the 2 witnesses I found. I can't just stand around," Ethan exclaimed, even though he knew she was right. Going in without backup would be suicidal. "The nearest patrol car is 4 minutes out," Detective Martinez assured him. "I've already dispatched them with your location. Just hold your position." Ethan ended the call, turning to the homeless woman and child. "Did you see anyone else? Any men near the child?" The woman shook her head. "Just the boy and the dog, but we were pretty far away, and then we were running for our lives." The sound of sirens grew closer, and within minutes, 2 police cruisers raced past Ethan's car toward the bridge. He instructed the woman and child to stay put, then followed behind the police vehicles at a safe distance. At the bridge, officers were already deploying with tactical caution, weapons drawn as they scanned the area for both the dog and potential human threats. One officer approached Ethan's car as he pulled up. "Stay back, sir," the officer warned. "We're still securing the scene." Through the windshield, Ethan could see another officer following what appeared to be paw prints in the mud leading into a large drainage tunnel beneath the bridge. His every instinct screamed to run after them, to find his son, but he forced himself to wait, knowing he would only complicate their efforts. Long minutes passed, each second an eternity of helpless waiting. Then the radio on the officer's shoulder crackled to life. "We've located the boy, requesting immediate medical assistance. The dog is in the tunnel, cornered but still aggressive. It released the boy, but he was heavily injured." When Ethan spotted the animal control team approaching, he didn't wait for clearance. He leapt from his car and sprinted toward the tunnel entrance by the river. An officer shouted after him, but didn't give chase, turning his attention instead to coordinating with the arriving ambulance. Inside the tunnel, the air was damp and cold, the shallow water at the bottom soaking through Ethan's shoes. The tunnel curved slightly, and as he rounded the bend, he saw a cluster of officers at the far end, struggling to subdue the dog near the concrete wall where the old tunnel came to a dead end. Between the officers, huddled against the wall, was Joshua. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the blood soaking his son's clothing, the unnatural way he held his arm, the pallor of his skin. "Joshua!" he called, his voice echoing off the tunnel walls. One of the officers turned, motioning for Ethan to stay back. The German shepherd was being held at bay in a side channel of the tunnel, its growls reverberating ominously through the confined space. Ethan approached cautiously, his focus entirely on his son. Joshua's eyes were open, but glazed with pain, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Dad?" the boy whispered as Ethan knelt beside him. "I'm here, buddy," Ethan said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Help is coming. Just hold on." Joshua's clothing was torn in multiple places, revealing deep puncture wounds on his arms, legs, and torso where the dog had bitten him and torn into his flesh. His face had a long scratch across the cheek, narrowly missing his eye by inches. "It hurts?" "So much," Joshua whimpered, tears mixing with the blood on his face. I know," Ethan soothed, carefully taking his son's uninjured hand. "But you're going to be okay. The doctors will fix you up." The paramedics arrived moments later, gently moving Ethan aside to attend to Joshua. They worked efficiently, stabilizing his injuries and preparing him for transport. Meanwhile, animal control officers had secured the dog in a reinforced transport cage. As the medical team carefully moved Joshua onto a stretcher, Detective Martinez approached Ethan. "We found blood that doesn't match Joshua's," she reported. "It seems the dog may have attacked someone else as well, possibly one of the kidnappers." "Good," Ethan said grimly. "I hope it ripped them apart." The detective didn't reprimand him for the comment. "We're following the blood trail. Initial indications suggest 2 men were here. One got bitten worse than the other." Outside the tunnel, Ethan spotted the homeless woman and child speaking with another officer. He approached them as the paramedics loaded Joshua into the ambulance. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "If you hadn't seen what happened and flagged me down—" The woman shrugged uncomfortably. "We didn't do nothing special, just trying to save our own skins, really." "You were in the right place at the right time," Ethan insisted. "You helped me find my son before it was too late. I want to properly thank you later, when this is all over." "That's not necessary," the woman said, but Ethan could see a flicker of hope in her tired eyes at the prospect of assistance. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted nearby. 2 officers were escorting a handcuffed man toward a patrol car, while a second man was being helped by paramedics, his arm and leg heavily bandaged where the dog had apparently bitten him. The injured man glared at his less wounded companion. "You coward," he snarled. "Hiding behind me and letting me take all the bites?" The other man spat on the ground. "Shut up, Carlos. It's not my fault you're slower than me." Ethan stared at the men with pure hatred, recognizing them as the same pair he'd seen at Northwood's kennels earlier. It took every ounce of his self-control not to lunge at them, to demand answers about why they'd targeted his family. A paramedic approached, interrupting his dark thoughts. "Sir, we need to transport your son immediately. Do you want to ride with him?" Ethan nodded, turning away from the arrested men. Justice would come for them soon enough. Right now, Joshua needed him more. The ambulance raced through Maple Hollow, sirens wailing as it cut through the afternoon traffic. In the cramped confines of the vehicle, Ethan held Joshua's uninjured hand while paramedics worked to stabilize him, attaching IV fluids and monitoring his vital signs. "You're doing great, buddy," Ethan encouraged, even as fear threatened to overwhelm him. The wounds were deep and numerous, some still bleeding despite the pressure bandages. "The dog," Joshua whispered, his voice faint. "Mireille and they just let it go. They said it was hungry." Ethan squeezed his son's hand gently. "Try not to talk now. Save your strength." "They said—" "Rodridge sent them," Joshua continued, each word a struggle. "Said they worked for him, but Mireille was better with money and ideas." One of the paramedics glanced at Ethan. "His blood pressure's dropping. We need to keep him calm and still." Ethan nodded, leaning closer to Joshua. "Everything's going to be okay. The police caught the men who did this. Just rest now." When they arrived at Maple Hollow Memorial Hospital, a trauma team was waiting at the emergency entrance. Joshua was whisked away immediately, leaving Ethan standing in the chaotic ER lobby, his son's blood still staining his clothes. A nurse guided him to a waiting area, assuring him that Joshua was in good hands. "The doctor will come speak with you as soon as they've assessed his injuries," she promised. Ethan inquired about Claire, learning that she was in surgery. The bullet had damaged her liver, requiring immediate surgical intervention, but the doctors were cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. Time passed in an excruciating blur. Ethan alternated between pacing the waiting room and sitting with his head in his hands, replaying the day's events and wondering how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. The sentencing that morning, what should have been closure, now seemed like a cruel joke. Finally, a doctor in scrubs approached. "Mr. Coulter? I'm Dr. Patel. I've been treating your son." Ethan stood immediately. "How is he?" Dr. Patel's expression was serious but measured. "Joshua has multiple dog bites, some quite severe. The most concerning are on his abdomen and thigh, where the animal's teeth penetrated deeply. We've cleaned the wounds thoroughly and started him on a strong course of antibiotics to prevent infection. He'll also need treatment for tetanus and rabies as a precaution." Will he be okay?" Ethan asked, dreading the answer. "The wounds will heal, though some will require plastic surgery due to the tissue damage," Dr. Patel explained. "There's no injury to major arteries or organs, which is fortunate. However, the psychological trauma of the attack, especially given his history, is something we'll need to address." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him despite the gravity of the situation. Joshua was alive. After everything they'd been through, that simple fact felt like a miracle. "Can I see him?" "He's sedated now while we continue to treat his wounds, but yes, you can see him briefly. And I understand your wife is here as well?" "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "She was shot during the same incident." Dr. Patel's expression softened with sympathy. "I'll have a nurse check on her status for you. This way, please." Joshua lay pale and still on the hospital bed, his exposed skin a patchwork of bandages and antiseptic marks. An IV delivered fluids and medications, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. Despite the damage inflicted by the dog, the steady rise and fall of his chest reassured Ethan that his son was, indeed, still fighting. After spending a few minutes with Joshua, a nurse informed Ethan that Claire was out of surgery and stabilized in recovery. She guided him to another floor where he found his wife awake, though groggy from anesthesia and pain medication. "Ethan," Claire whispered as he entered the room. Her voice was weak, but her eyes searched his face anxiously. "Joshua?" "He's here in the hospital," Ethan assured her, taking her hand. "He was attacked by a dog, but the doctors say he'll recover." Relief softened Claire's features. Thank God. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with renewed focus. Those men, they came right after Mireille left. "What happened?" Ethan asked gently, aware that she needed to rest, but equally aware that her account might contain crucial information. Claire swallowed painfully. "After you left with Joshua, I was preparing dinner when 2 men knocked on the door. I saw a German Shepherd in their car when I answered. They tried to force me into the vehicle. But I refused. I had already dialed 911 on my phone in my pocket, so the call was connected when one of them drew a gun. Ethan's grip on her hand tightened. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I should have been there." She shook her head weakly. Number. If you had been home, Joshua would have been there too. She took a shuddering breath. They were angry when I resisted. The one with the gun shot me, and the other hit me with your baseball bat from the hall closet. They were panicking, arguing with each other. I heard one say something about, "That woman promised to pay us more than Rodridge, but now we're screwed." Then they mentioned helping Mirai finish the business and not going back to Rodridge, or they'd be dead for betraying him. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Detective Martinez entered, her expression grave but professional. "Mr. and Mrs. Coulter, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to update you on the investigation." Ethan gestured for her to continue, not releasing Claire's hand. "We've arrested Rodridge Thompson at Northwood's Kennels," the detective reported. "He was preparing to flee when officers arrived. During questioning, he admitted that the two men who attacked your wife were supposed to work for him. Apparently, they had a plan set for tomorrow during your move, but they betrayed him by working with Mirai instead." "What was he planning to do to us?" Ethan asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Detective Martinez's expression hardened. "He hasn't revealed the specifics yet, only that he owed Harold the revenge he deserved. When we mentioned Mirai, he became extremely agitated, claiming she ruined his relationship with Harold." Claire looked bewildered. "I don't understand. Two people were plotting revenge for Harold? How is that possible? Everyone described him as a complete loner." "It seems Harold had a more complicated personal life than anyone realized," Detective Martinez said. "Rodridge and Mirai apparently had no knowledge of each other until recently. Both had romantic relationships with Harold that he kept entirely separate." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "All this time, we thought Harold acted alone. He had accomplices all along?" "Not accomplices in the kidnapping," the detective clarified. "From what we've gathered so far, neither Rodridge nor Mirai knew about Joshua being held captive until it became public. Their revenge plans were conceived after Harold's arrest." "How did Rodridge know about the bunker?" Ethan asked. "He claims Harold showed it to him years ago, but he never saw Joshua there. He stayed silent during the trial to avoid implicating himself, all while planning his revenge. He was deeply loyal to Harold." Claire's hand tightened around Ethan's. "What about Mirai? Has she told you anything?" Detective Martinez's expression darkened. "I'm afraid Mirai Choi is dead. During processing at the station, after one of our officers told her she wouldn't be going to the same prison as Harold, she managed to seize an officer's service weapon. Before anyone could react, she shot herself in the head. We believe her motive was driven solely by her twisted relationship with Harold." The news landed like a physical blow. Despite everything, Ethan hadn't wished death on the woman, only answers and justice. "And the men?" he asked after a moment of stunned silence. "Carlos Reyes is being treated here for his dog bites under police guard. His partner, Michael Torres, is in custody at the station. Both are cooperating, trying to minimize their charges by implicating each other and their employers." From their statements, it seems they were caught between Rodridge and Mirai, trying to maximize their payment by playing both sides. They used the dog that Rodridge had been planning to use during tomorrow's move. Ethan's mind reeled at the web of deception and betrayal. So tomorrow, during the move, Rodridge planned to kill all three of you, Detective Martinez confirmed grimly. The free moving service was a trap. The realization that they had nearly walked into a deadly ambush sent a chill through Ethan. Only Mirai's earlier intervention, however malicious her own intentions, had disrupted Rodridge's careful planning. "I don't understand," Claire said, her voice faltering with exhaustion. Why would they risk so much to avenge a man who's already been sentenced to 25 years? Detective Martinez sighed. Love and obsession make people do incomprehensible things. Both Rodridge and Mirai seemed to believe they were fulfilling Harold's wishes, that he would somehow know and appreciate their actions. Claire's eyes began to close, the medication and her body's need for healing overtaking her desire to understand. Detective Martinez noticed immediately. "We can continue this conversation later," she said gently. "You both need rest. We'll have officers stationed outside both your room and Joshua's for security, though we believe all involved parties have been apprehended." As the detective left, Ethan remained by Claire's bedside, watching as she drifted into sleep. The day that had begun with such promise, with justice finally served and plans for a fresh start, had descended into a nightmare worse than anything he could have imagined. And yet, incredibly, they had survived, wounded, traumatized anew, but alive. Tomorrow's move would have to wait, but they would still have their future together, a future that had nearly been stolen from them once again. Dawn broke over Maple Hollow, casting long shadows through the hospital windows. Ethan had spent the night moving between Claire's room and Joshua's, unable to rest while both were injured and vulnerable. The doctors had advised him to go home, to get some sleep, but the thought of leaving either of them alone was unbearable. In Joshua's room, the morning nurse completed her checks of his vital signs and bandages. "The doctor will be in soon to examine him," she told Ethan. "He's stable, which is good news. The antibiotics are working, and there's no sign of infection in the wounds." Ethan nodded gratefully, studying his son's sleeping face. Even in repose, a slight furrow between Joshua's brows suggested his sleep was troubled by dark dreams. Dr. Patel arrived shortly after, reviewing Joshua's chart before examining his injuries. "We'll need to perform the first round of debridement and stitching today," he explained to Ethan. "The plastic surgery to minimize scarring will come later, once the initial healing has begun." "Will he be in much pain?" Ethan asked. "We'll keep him comfortable with medication," Dr. Patel assured him. "But yes, the recovery will be painful at times. These wounds are deep, and the tissue damage is extensive, particularly on his face and hands where he tried to defend himself." The thought of Joshua attempting to fight off the vicious animal sent a fresh wave of anguish through Ethan. His son had already endured so much trauma in his young life. How much more could a child bear before breaking completely? Dr. Patel seemed to read his thoughts. "Children are remarkably resilient," he said gently. "With proper support, medical, psychological, and familial, even the deepest wounds can heal." He was just starting to feel safe again, Ethan said, more to himself than the doctor. After 8 years of captivity, months of therapy, and now this. "The trauma is significant," Dr. Patel acknowledged. "But it's important to recognize that this experience, while terrible, is fundamentally different from his captivity. This time, he wasn't alone. You found him quickly, and he knows you were searching for him. That makes a difference in how children process traumatic events." Ethan absorbed this perspective, finding a measure of comfort in it. "Thank you, Doctor." After Dr. Patel left, Ethan returned to Claire's room. She was awake, looking stronger than she had the previous evening. A nurse was helping her sit up slightly, adjusting her pillows for comfort. "How's Joshua?" Claire asked immediately upon seeing him. Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. "Stable. They're going to clean and stitch his wounds today. The doctor says he's doing as well as can be expected." Claire closed her eyes briefly, relief evident in her expression. "I've been so worried. When those men came—" She trailed off, the memory clearly painful. "Detective Martinez was here earlier," she continued after a moment. "She said they recovered security footage from the therapy clinic. It shows Mirai approaching Joshua outside the building and leading him to a car." "He went willingly?" Ethan asked, surprised. Claire nodded. The detective said it appeared that way on the footage. She thinks Miri may have convinced him somehow. The thought that Joshua had been tricked rather than forcibly abducted was somehow an additional cruelty. His son's trust, so cautiously extended after years of deception, had been weaponized against him once again. The conversation was interrupted when a nurse entered to check Claire's vital signs. Noticing her patient's fatigue, she gave Ethan a pointed look. "Mrs. Coulter needs her rest," she said firmly. Ethan nodded in understanding. He quietly made his way to Joshua's room, finding his son awake but groggy from the pain medication. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said softly, taking a seat beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" Joshua's eyes, dull with medication but still alert enough to recognize his father, focused on Ethan's face. "It hurts," he admitted. "I know," Ethan said, carefully taking his son's unbandaged hand. "The doctors are giving you medicine to help with that, and they're going to fix you up today, clean the wounds, and put in some stitches." Joshua nodded slightly, then asked, "Mom?" "Mom's doing okay," Ethan assured him. "She's resting in another room. She got hurt too, but the doctors say she's going to be fine." Joshua's eyes filled with tears. "I shouldn't have gone with that lady. I was too curious, and I thought I could be brave. I should have known better." Ethan's heart clenched painfully. "This is not your fault, Joshua, not one bit. That woman tricked you, and those men, they were bad people who wanted to hurt our family. But they're all caught now. They can't hurt us anymore." "I thought he was safe in prison," Joshua whispered. "Harold? I thought he couldn't reach us anymore." The simple statement, delivered with such confusion and hurt, perfectly encapsulated the terrible irony of their situation. Harold himself was indeed safely contained, but the toxic influence of his manipulation had spread like poison, affecting people they hadn't even known existed. "He can't reach us," Ethan confirmed. "What happened yesterday wasn't Harold's doing. It was people who thought they were acting on his behalf, without his knowledge. And now they're all caught too." Joshua seemed to consider this, his young mind struggling to process the complex web of human motivations that had led to his suffering. Finally, he asked, "Can we still move away? To the new house?" "Yes," Ethan promised. "As soon as you and Mom are well enough to travel. We'll still have our fresh start, just a little later than planned." Joshua nodded, his eyelids growing heavy as the medication pulled him back toward sleep. "I want to go far away," he murmured, "where no one knows about Harold or the bunker or any of it." "We will," Ethan whispered, watching as his son drifted into sleep. "We'll go as far as we need to." He remained by Joshua's bedside, a silent guardian against the shadows that continued to pursue them, even as the winter sun climbed higher in the sky outside. The battle wasn't over, but at least now all their enemies were visible, named, and contained. That, Ethan decided, was progress of a sort, a hard-won step toward the healing they all desperately needed.